I'm ready to go.
All set, Sophia.
Okay. You offer approval of the minutes.
I'll move to approve the May meeting minutes.
And I'll second Steinhauser.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Cool beans. And Jason, would you mind dropping in the chat the YouTube link for the committee? I don't know if you see that in chat. I have my screen up, so it's hard for me to do. Okay. So welcome everybody. I hope everybody, if you got a chance to look at your packet, there's the RFP for the anti-displacement working group. I'm going to turn it over to Sam, if that's okay with the co-chairs, to kind of walk us through the piece of it, and hopefully we can have a good amount of discussion on it if it's feeling right, if that sounds good to folks.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Good morning. Sam O'Connell with Met Council. Before we talk about the give an update on the anti-displacement working group, and we'll walk through the request for proposals today and get some feedback from folks around the virtual table today. Just also wanted to make you aware that on Friday, the Federal Transit Administration also released its annual report on funding. The reason why that's pretty important is that's who we look to partner with to provide a significant amount of funding for these projects. So it's called the Capital Investment Grants, and these are grants. Sometimes you hear us use the words New Starts interchangeably, kind of the old New Starts program. So it's the federal program that we adhere to. And pretty much everything that we do, everything from procurement to how we report on the project, to just make sure that we're constantly eligible about that. So just wanted to bring that to your attention that that was released on Friday. And the reason why that was released, and the reason why it's important, is that our Blue Line Extension project continues to have a placeholder of project engineering. So that is a phase of project development. What FTA did do, however, is basically replaced our rating. So typically our project in both sort of financial and kind of project justification, we had a summary rating of medium high. They replaced our rating with understudy. So we feel that that does reflect where the project is today in terms of understudy, and kind of our next steps at this point. Sorry, I shouldn't say understudy. Under review is what they put us under. So as you know, we do meet with the FTA on a quarterly basis. In fact, we have our next meeting on June 15th, and we'll learn a little bit more of what that is, but it's our opportunity to connect with the Federal Transit Administration staff. They're located in Chicago, and we talk about all of the good work that's been going on, all of that outreach that is occurring, and also the technical work. And then they provide us some initial reactions to what we're doing and any overall guidance. So just want folks to be aware that that did come out on Friday. And if you have any questions, just let us know. But it's nothing that we thought didn't reflect exactly where we are in terms of where our project is at this point. I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions, or Dan, if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
I think,
as well.
I think, Sam, as you said, it's generally good news. The FDA, the Federal Transit Administration, is scratching their heads a little bit about a project that has advanced down an alignment, had moved through the process for a number of years, and now is in transition and doing a shift. And so we've let them know all along what we've been doing with the project. And so in that respect, they are reflecting, kind of exactly where we are, that we're studying some options here in the Twin Cities. We're looking to keep this project, this LRT project, alive. we're looking to keep it in the program. They've kept it in engineering. There aren't very many projects in engineering in the country right now. There's only a few, and so they've kept us there with the idea that we will continue the process we're working on now and see if we are able to develop a community supported alignment option to continue to advance through. And then that'll allow us to to reevaluate ridership, reevaluate travel time, reevaluate costs, and then develop a project ranking from there.
Okay. And we can send out the link as well to the report so folks can see how the other projects in the country that we are basically also competing for also are being rated and stack up in the scope of their projects as well. So turning to the anti-displacement working group update, in your packet, hopefully you had seen a document in there that is basically the draft for the request for proposals. Hennepin County will be releasing the request for proposals in June, and we will talk a little bit about what that timeline looks like. But our purpose today is to just sort of walk through some of the main elements of the request for proposals. We would like for your thoughts on this draft. We've kind of workshopped it as a group, as a project management team. We also asked some of our city partners to provide some thoughts on it as well. So basically what you're seeing is kind of like almost the third version of this request for proposals. We would like your thoughts, your comments, so we can update, we can refine, so it better reflects the work that we'd like to be doing. And that's and that version would be what's released to the public. So with that, I'm just going to highlight a few pieces of this. So if we can move to the next slide. Thank you so much, Jason. So as we think about bringing a third party on, so we'll be calling them a consultant through the RFP and for our process here today. Really, the consultant is responsible for convening, facilitating, and managing the work plan of the working group as we look to develop policy and actionable recommendations as part of our project here. So it is not somebody that is coming from the Met Council or from Hennepin County. It is a third party that we're looking to bring on to be a part of this work. Ideally, this consultant would have subject matter expertise, so they are steeped in anti-displacement policy and knowing best practices, and then also come with local and expertise as well in terms of understanding how we've tried to tackle that locally as well. This consultant will also work very closely with our project management team. So a lot of the folks that you see from our Hennepin County and Met Council staff as this work goes forward. Next slide, please. So speaking about those preferred qualifications, so this could be an individual or the consultant could be a team, and the team can come from a variety of different sectors and expertise. So we are really looking for some creativity here. We're really looking to tap into some of the good experiences. So speaking of that, we would love to see that demonstrated expertise or knowledge or effectiveness of work done in displacement and affordability, economic development, and community wealth building strategies. We would like to see the consultant do work in local communities and have a vested interest in supporting these communities, and has also worked with state and local agencies and community partners, so they kind of understand the pros and cons of working through organizations that are vested in this, but sometimes also brings a little bit of the red tape, but can work through that. Also, I think we think it's a benefit that they have expertise or some experience in complex infrastructure projects as well. And just knowing the complexity and sometimes the timelines with our projects can also create opportunities and also some challenges with that. and also builds trust with communities vulnerable to displacement. So really centering themselves in the experiences of our community members. And pretty key, continuing to engage audiences both in person and as we get through the pandemic, and virtually, to make sure that all of our community members are feeling safe while we are doing engagement. Next slide, please. So we're asking that the consultant should have a minimum of 10 years of experience working in these areas, economic development, housing, racial equity, or also have cultural competency. And that could be a combination of education and work experience. Again, these are preferred qualifications. We will be looking at the proposals, but this is what we feel that the consultant should need as a base as they come into this work. Next slide, please. So the tasks outlined in the RFP really kind of gets to the work at hand, if you will. And just want to talk a little bit about these tasks at a high level. So really the project management piece is developing the work plan and the scope and kind of the timeline. So that is the first task. So we understand how will this work get done, what is needed to get the work done, and what is the timeline. The second task that we thought was really key for the consultants is also to work group facilitation. How is this group going to work together? What are going to be the goals and basically the philosophy of the group working together? So developing a charter, also developing a process to come to decision making. We're not going to dictate what that is. We'd like the consultant with the with the working group come together and develop that process as well. And then basically prepare updates as needed and be working with not only the BAC here, but our community advisory committee, the cohort group, as well as corridor management committee and community work steering committee. So they also have a responsibility to be working with and engaging and receiving feedback from those groups as well. Next piece is the market analysis and really understanding where are those opportunities in terms of affordable housing, in terms of economic development, but then also where are some of those challenges as well and what we could be doing to address those issues. So this is really that data-driven piece. So we'd be touching base with our own organizations and bringing some of that data to the conversation, and then also helping us identify community assets. So really working also with our community members and making sure that community assets are identified and obviously protected throughout this process. Task 4 is really that policy audit and kind of develop that existing policies and programs that address anti-displacement or gentrification issues within our communities, and really understanding, do they work? Can they work better? What needs to be done for them to work better and really be centered in experiences with our communities. We're also looking for a case study review. So that's really our best practices. What are other communities doing, whether they're local here or around the country, and especially like our peer groups around the nation. So bringing in some of that expertise and that knowledge into the conversation. Task 5 is community consultation. So we know in order to be centered in the experiences of community, we're asking for the contractor to also be engaged in that. So we would see the contractor in the work of the anti-displacement working group, coordinating with our outreach efforts to provide opportunities to hear from community members, to understand, to go further, understand a little deeper in terms of their experience and bring that into their process. And then ultimately in task 6 is really pulling all of that together in recommendations and an implementation plan. And this is where folks like Dan at Hennepin County and myself really, and our city partners and other state agencies. This is really what we're going to support as well, to help receive this information and see where we can begin to start implementing. So this is task 6 is really this is the culmination of the advisory, excuse me, I keep calling them an advisory committee, that they're our working group comes together. So that's a high level overview of the different tasks. We have learned when we do these RFPs, we need to be more expansive in our communications. So we will be developing a social media campaign to ensure that folks know that this RFP has been released. We do really want the whole world to know that this is out there. And we will be working with our project partners and the community engagement cohort, as well as everybody around the table today, to ensure that you're aware of it and that you're also sharing that to your networks as well. Next slide, please. So one area that we would like to and have a discussion on, or receive your thoughts on this, is that there will be a selection committee pulled together. So some of the project management team members and the organizations that they represent would be reviewing and scoring these proposals. So we would also like to have a member from the Business Advisory Committee. We would also ask that a member from our Community Advisory Committee also be a part of this. So it's an opportunity to see the breadth of the proposals submitted. And it is a little bit of asking a little bit of your time to review and score all the proposals. We would meet as an evaluation panel team to come together to come to consensus on ranking them as well. We may also conduct interviews if needed to learn a little bit more of the proposers and the work that they would be venturing on. And we would also ask that you really need to think about if you will have a conflict of interest with any of the potential organizations or contractors that might be proposing as well. We want to make sure that this is a very clean process, and making sure that this moves quickly as possible. We're going to have Kathy Gold talk a little bit about what that process is going to be in terms of getting the RFP out on the street and the overall process of selecting a contractor. But why don't we just pause right here and talk a little bit of how the BAC potentially would like to identify representatives to serve on the selection committee. So Felicia, I don't know if you've had some thoughts, or Sophia, if there's some initial thoughts about the benefits or how BAC would like to identify their representative.
I haven't personally thought a lot about how the BAC would identify its representative. I'll say that I'm totally willing to be that representative, but interested in if others are super excited about it. But to clarify, it would have someone from BAC, someone from CAC, but no one from the CMC.
That's correct.
From the Felicia, thanks. Yeah, from the Corridor Management Committee, we're not proposing a policymaker on a selection committee at this time. Yes.
Gotcha.
It'll be all staff as well as the BAC, CAC. So a committee of maybe 5 to 7 kind of project, and all of you, or what have you.
Yeah, Felicia, this
Someone from the council is on the selection committee?
Pardon, Felicia, can I hear that question again?
Yeah, and maybe I should post it in the chat so it's not too much of a back and forth, but I wanted to clarify that Met Council will be on the selection committee, but not any of our elected officials. Is that what I'm understanding? Like policymakers, you said?
Exactly. So appointed or elected officials typically don't serve on selection committees. So it would be project management staff from both Hennepin County and the Met Council. We would probably ask for city representative, lead staff representative as well, and then BAC and CAC. Yes.
I think you should have more than one person from maybe the CAC. I know we don't want the selection committee itself to be big either, but yeah. But I think that makes sense, and open to what Mike's thinking.
Felicia, I was just posting that I don't know who the potential vendors are. I may have a conflict. So I just don't even want to put my name in there just for that piece.
Understood. I don't see that I have any conflicts or potential conflicts myself, but yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm totally down to do it. I'm very much interested in this process.
All right.
I would
That's
definitely
awesome.
second Felicia to take the role if she's interested in it.
Ryan moves
And I would,
that appointment. Alex supports as well in chat.
I would echo what Felicia said regarding the number of people. I think it would maybe behoove us to maybe have a more representation than the one. I don't know what the right number is, but I think more than one would be helpful from a community lens.
Okay. Thank you for that. We will be meeting with the Community Advisory Committee tomorrow night, and we will have a similar discussion so we can report back on that as well. Well, Felicia, until we hear differently, it sounds like we've got a BAC representative. So thank you so much for that. And we'll be connecting here as well. But that although Felicia has agreed to kind of take on some additional roles, we are still looking at all of our partners here around the table and really asking you to take a look at that request for proposals. Let us know what's really striking with you, what's really kind of hitting with you in terms of this work. We are still taking feedback. We still have an opportunity to craft this in a way that really serves our community and serves our purpose here as well. So I would ask that you send, if you do happen to have comments, send them to me. You've got my email address right there by June 24th. That allows us to take in the comments not only from Business Advisory Committee, but like I said, tomorrow we all meet with our Community Advisory Committee, and we will ask of the same for them to provide any comments, as well as our cohort that is supporting the engagement, and then Corridor Management Committee. So when the Corridor Management Committee meets next week, we will also be asking for their thoughts as well. So please just send that to me by June 24th. That allows us a couple of days to review and bring in those thoughts and themes into the final RFP, which we're targeting June 28th. And I'm just going to turn this over to Kathy Gold on the next slide. And she's going to walk through the process of bringing on a contractor. So Kathy, if you could do that.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So walking through the steps, of course, on Friday, May 28th, those materials were sent to our stakeholders, including you, for review of the draft. And then we're meeting with you this morning, of course, and tomorrow morning with the CAC. June 2nd, also, we have a meeting with our cohort to review the same information and the timeline as we're going through here. June 10th, we'll present this to the CMC as well. And as Sam had said, all the RFP comments are due and collected on the 24th, and hopefully getting this out for solicitation to the general public on June 28th. So you can pause there if there's any questions on up to June 28th. Just trying to be respectful that I've just thrown out quite a few dates here, but pretty much all meetings to go over the information and then get the RFP out the door, so to speak. Felicia says, I only wish it could be quicker. And I too, Felicia, it is, you know, it's a process. And I think staff here is going to be, you know, quickly turning this around, but we also want to be thoughtful of the time that it takes to put a good proposal together. So if we want to keep going here, we'll have the pre-bid meeting on July 12th, understanding there's a holiday in between there. And of course, proposals due on July 27th. So, I mean, that allows some time here to get those proposals put together from organizations, and then a quick eval and decision-making turnaround here, July 29th through the 30th. That will then follow a decision and getting our board action request ready for communication on August 3rd to our Public Works Committee on the 10th, and then finally board approval on the 17th. And that is a process, and you know, that's the quickest I think that we could turn that around with our process at the Hennepin County. You know, and during this whole time, the 3rd through the 17th of August, we will be undergoing our negotiation process with the selected vendor, in addition to getting our internal contracting process. So no time will be wasted through the 3rd through the 17th of August. There's still work continuing here. And then hopefully we are all in agreement and have everything put together for that contract to go out to the vendor on August 17th. With then getting all the signatures executed on Hennepin County side by August 26th, with an early September onboarding of the vendor, and also getting some of those initial meetings calendared. So I'm open to any questions that you may have.
This is Tim. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, you know, I've been listening to the discussion about this displacement, and I think I mentioned early on that, you know, from my viewpoint, I think this is very, very preliminary. We're talking about a project that's going to go maybe online 5 years from now, from what I understand from recent conversations. And we're talking about selecting putting together an RFP for a displacement coordinator now. 5 years from now, that organization may not even be around. We don't know where the alignment's going to be, particularly in Minneapolis and even in Robbinsdale. And I just think that it's really premature. And I think there's some other things that we could be doing to prioritize our time and where that alignment's going to be, other community discussions before we talk about displacement, because we don't know what we're displacing. And while I appreciate the efforts and the interest in protecting the properties around those that are going to be displaced, if at all, I just think this is really premature. But I'm a team player. I'll go along with whatever everybody wants to do, but that's just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I just want to echo Tim. This is Chris Webley. I also too feel like this feels like we're jumping the gun from the lens of just not having a clear lens of what data exists with the work that's already been done. The breakout, we met as a breakout team maybe a week or so ago, and there seemed to be a lot of synergy and concern around the data that we don't have today. So, you know, some of the questions that were thrown out were how many buildings are impacted from the route going down Broadway versus Lowry, how many businesses have to go away. What I initially saw our work, and maybe this is some onus on me of not truly understanding what my role was going to be within this project, but I thought it was that we were using our networks as individuals and our expertise as individuals to reach back into community, to have that true engagement, and the work that this committee be doing an extension of us in community to liaison that feedback down. And so, what we're hearing in community, to make an informed decision on even the routes, to even then to even start to talk about displacement, to Tim's point, because to me it is a linear process and you can't do one without doing the other. I think it would help for me to get some questions from a data lens to understand the impact to even start to. So to Tim's points, I think there's a few steps that this feels a little ahead of those. Again, I'm a team player, so I'm not saying that this isn't the right step, but I think that there should be some prior steps to this to get community the information that they need so that they can really do the true engagement that needs to be done with Northsiders to one, communicate that information of what we learned from this data, but then to get input, I think would be super helpful.
Tim and Chris, thank you for those comments, and we hear that. I think what we're trying to do is strike a balance and keep this process moving, because some of these plans and policies may involve some, statewide organizations, especially when we think about affordable housing, and it takes a little while sometimes to work together on some of those programs and policies. And so I appreciate your comments on maybe not having all of the elements together. Chris, in particular, that market analysis, that is some of that information that we're hoping to bring pretty early, because Council and Hennepin County does collect a lot of that information and kind of help sort of jumpstart and get the advisory, working group, apologize, I keep messing up on that, the working group they don't have to spend too much time on that. We can bring our resources to that as well. We'll continue to engage. So these conversations will continue at BAC and CAC and Corridor Management Committee about the routes, about potential impacts as we get in and understand a little bit more of alignments and locations of stations. We will continue to bring that information forward. So again, we're just trying to strike a balance of some of our community members who are saying we need to move faster. We need to actually have some of these program modifications or policies in place now. So, but I appreciate your comments, and we'll continue to work on bringing some of that information to these conversations. Any more comments?
Mike's hand is up, so definitely just feel free to jump in.
So from my understanding, from our discussions in the past, was that we wanted to get the anti-displacement and gentrification set up before and not while we're running through the process, because I had thought that having someone with us as we moved along, and instead of going along the process and then hiring somebody, and based off of this graph, taking 3 months to hire somebody, we're going to be fits and stops. So if we have this person in the beginning, and then we come back and we keep checking with them as we go through the process, we're not going to have to slow down to do this. And to be honest with you, I agree this could be done much faster, but I just want someone side by side that's an expert at this. And I don't want to make any guesses, because that's where we're going to make mistakes.
Mike,
Yeah,
I think, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, I appreciate the comments. And quite honestly, is quite interesting to hear that community is wanting, some of community, I think, is wanting to go faster. I don't think that this is the intent, but I just want to say it. A lot of the language that's being used on the call is it's almost like it's been decided and that we're moving forward with the plan because the plan has to keep going at the speed that it's going, because for business purposes, our lens and the work that I do day to day in the community with doing the same as at work, community engagement through the development lens of real estate. We all want to go fast, I say included, but the true nature of community engagement is slow by experience. So I get nervous when we use vernacular like we need to go faster, or we need to stay on track. And it's just like true community engagement is going to take time. And I just want to make sure that we're not rushing this to get to a predetermined outcome. And maybe it's not I'm not saying it is predetermined. I'm just saying that I caution the narrative that we need to run through this process. This is a huge infrastructure, billions of dollars coming to the north side. And that to me doesn't feel like something we want to rush. I understand the narrative of we want to be proactive and get ahead of things, which I totally agree on. I just want to make sure that we're not losing sight of, and maybe Felicia can speak more to this, of how community works on the north side and the organic grassroots, and a lot of that stuff takes time. So I just want to caution the group of like let's commit to doing this right, regardless amount of the time that it might take.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. I will say that I've been one of the folks who have asked that we do start this anti-displacement work now rather than later, because it's traditionally felt more like an afterthought. But I absolutely want to echo the sentiment around not wanting it to be rushed. There are folks in community very much concerned about displacement, and not just trying to prevent it, but like how do we mitigate it? And they're ready to like start having these conversations and start thinking out strategy. And again, that's coming from a lens of, because there's been a lot of language around staying on track, everyone really assumes that it's going to happen. And by way of, word of mouth kind of feedback, there's a lot of talk about, is it going to be on West Broadway? And I'm assuming we're going to hear some data from the community surveys today that might confirm or disprove that. But there definitely is this thing in the air that it's going to happen and it's likely going to be West Broadway. And some of us are kind of moving like, okay, well, how do we mitigate that? So I do appreciate this sort of this warning around rushing through it. It's a reminder to me around the fact that, and again, in our breakout groups, we're talking about this quite often, not just in the BAC, but even in the engagement groups. We're very much the Northsiders. We're talking about this feels rushed. We don't have a lot of time. There's still a lot of information that community doesn't know yet. What I was hoping was that, similar to Mike talking about the anti-displacement work happening alongside of this other work that we're doing, for me, not so much to rush it along, but to be tapping into that along the way. And knowing that there are billions of dollars here, I feel like we can do both. If we get a reputable person or organization to really facilitate and carry this anti-displacement work along with everything else, that's what I'm interested in seeing, but not so much from a rush standpoint, but from a really mindful, intentional standpoint around we prioritize thinking about anti-displacement and engaging these communities around it as well, so that we can really better understand like what's valuable to these communities, what their concerns are around displacement, and the best ways to either mitigate or prevent that, so that we're not getting gentrification and we're not getting communities transformed into something that they didn't want to be. So those are my thoughts on it.
This is Candace Othout, and I wanted to bring up a couple of points from years of experience. I've served on similar committees to this for well on 25, 30 years now. And the concern I see, especially with light rail, and I started working on light rail in 1982, is that there needs to be strong, you need to hear the communities and really listen to what they're saying. For example, as time has gone on, looking at the routing of originally putting it right through residential areas and within 50 feet of a school in Robbinsdale was kind of rammed through. I happen to live in Crystal, and the Bass Lake intersection is a hazard to start with. We've dealt with situations at one point where, with dealing with heavy rail, we would have all access from one side of town to the other blocked off for a good 5 minutes. And I have actually seen emergency vehicles with their lights and siren on have to turn around and go a different way because of train traffic. Now we're going to add light rail in the middle of West Broadway. That is going to congest that area. That's one of 2, 3 major streets that you can get from the main part of Crystal to North Memorial Hospital. And that can be a real difficult issue. Same with fire, same with police. It is a situation where we need to be mindful of what the community itself is going through. And I know the emergency is the thing that's way out there and we never want to think about because we don't expect it to happen. But we've seen over and over again that we've had emergency situations where you can't get there from here, and it can be a real problem. So taking the time to really think through and hear what the people who will be most affected are saying is a really important part of the process. And we don't have enough data at this point to say this is a good location or that is a better location. And I know it takes a long time. I've watched this particular project developing since I moved here in 1999. It's not a simple project. There's a lot of people involved, and there are a lot of people whose lives will be very definitely disrupted by it. So let's take the time to do it right and do it on a data-based level. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Candace. I want to acknowledge that Kenya's hand is up and that there is a question in chat that from Jimmy that we can respond to after we let Kenya speak, if that sounds good to the chairs.
Yes, that's fine with me.
Good morning. Just a couple things just to reiterate. One, I'm also supportive of getting the displacement coordinator or someone on just to begin to look and think through this alongside the planning process, which is critically important. I just really want to push very hard back on the vague language. I don't think the government need to be using vague language around our communities want this to go fast. I'm actually offended by that. So I want to make sure that when you're presenting, you're very clear about what you're talking about. So there's a lot of community people, and I want to make sure that like a community in Brooklyn Park or Robbinsdale is not dictating to a community in North Minneapolis or downtown. So be very specific about what you're talking about, who you're talking about. That's important to me. And how many people are you talking about? I don't know if you've gotten 3 emails and now you're saying our community wants us to go fast. I mean, so the vague language is not okay with me. So from the government especially. So that's really the only issue I have with what I've heard today, outside of because we're also here representing community. So I don't know who you're talking about. Other than just really making sure we can get some information, about the data that we're asking for. That's really important. You have some of that. You should have some of that. If you don't, what does it take to get it? And to move the displacement person or people forward so we can begin thinking about that? And are you going to be putting up more resources for community engagement? I think that's, you know, another piece, as I've heard that people just don't have enough resources to do this work, you know, that we're asking, and everybody's not going to come online on these little groups and all this. You know, remember, there is still a huge technology divide, you know, in our communities, across different communities. And so we're going to have to do more than putting up social media and, you know, places for folks to come and put their stuff online. Plus, they don't want to be attacked online, you know, by all these people who got varying opinions. That's a real thing too. So that's it.
Thanks for those comments. And you know, this is, you know, this is kind of a big topic with robust discussion, and it's multifaceted. I think there's been a few comments in chat too about kind of how all of this fits in, and some information, you know, specifically, you know, what does the kind of like the engineering impacts, right? There's a little bit of discussion of the difference between direct displacement, right? Like the engineering might directly impact property and wanting that data, and then the discussion of kind of indirect displacement and just the value. And so I think in our July committee meeting, we'll be getting more into the kind of the engineering details of analyzing the routes. And so we'll definitely bring that back and talk more. And you know, it's been a process, right? Because I think initially staff kind of putting out this proposal was initially a response that we heard from folks asking us to look more into it and get more ahead of it. So we're trying to be responsive, understanding that this is a complicated topic and needs a lot of time, and that's part of what the facilitator can help do as well. So anything from Sam? I see you kind of wanting to add.
Yeah, just thanks for the comments. And again, we're trying to strike a balance here, and definitely heard some critical concerns. We will continue to make sure that as we talk about this work, about where this is placed. So I appreciate the comments that this is in parallel. And the hope here is that the work of the working group is coming back and sharing their work to the advisory committees, and that everyone here has an opportunity to hear that and provide feedback. So it is, you know, a loop for sure, that it doesn't end, but that it continues as we go through our work and provides that feedback to the working group, and say that there is an area that maybe we want to delve a little deeper in. So there are the working group, the anti-displacement working group is hearing that feedback and know when we need to maybe spend a little bit more time in certain areas. So thank you for your comments today. I do appreciate that. I've been taking notes as well. We will have this conversation with the Community Advisory Committee. If there's any other thoughts specifically on the request for proposals or anything else that you want to connect on, please give me a call, send me an email, and happy to connect with you on this. So I just want to say thanks and appreciate the comments today.
Sophia, Sam, this is Tim. I noticed that Jimmy had some comments in the chat. Did you want to try to respond to a couple of his questions?
Sure. And kind of just going through some of them. I think one of his questions is about kind of like the engineering details, the direct impact, the costs of the route. We hope to really get more into that, especially in July. And I think we'll be reaching out to some, you know, area specific folks to actually get prepared for that conversation, and kind of look at some of the questions that staff has as we pull together plans. It is a lot of discussion needs to happen on the exact engineering details for that. I mean, that's basically how we advance the conversation in a lot of ways of the project. And the pulling together the facilitator for the anti-displacement work it is kind of the beginning of the conversation in some ways. You know, it's pulling together resources and policies and pushing for things that the community is already doing, amplifying that over time. I've heard a lot specifically also about, you know, construction, right? Mitigating for construction and things like that. And so, you know, it's when we talk about the anti-displacement working group, I think it's, you know, multifaceted. It's the direct displacement, so the engineering details themselves, the kind of like the mitigation and the support needed for construction, and then the broader kind of indirect displacement, kind of to that. You know, heard a bunch of comments too from folks, kind of in some of our initial engagement. We'll get to it. I can get to, was about, you know, supporting work that's happening already, development that's happening already, and whatnot. So definitely, we're just scratching the surface in a sense. And I know it feels, I think it feels fast, right? Because we're getting an RFP in the world, right, quickly. But we also need the time to do the work, and I hope that feels right. I know there's that balance, and so we're definitely taking that in. And sorry, I'm reading and thinking. And I want to specifically, I think since we didn't necessarily go over it as much this time, as we would anticipate that the facilitator and the work of the anti-displacement group would come back to this committee, so that the BAC would be involved in the work moving forward. We've attempted various graphics to explain that relationship, whether it's like arrows into or around or whatnot, and we don't quite have the best graphic, but we really want to emphasize that this committee will be critical and involved in that work going forward. Did I miss anything from Jimmy that was, sorry, trying to get through all the chat? Any other things that people feel that are critical to address?
I just have one thing. And now hearing everything, I just want to circle back to my comment of one, just reiterating that I agree with the balance of starting at a displacement work now. I just wanted to make sure that we're not losing sight of the data that the boots on the ground need to get the information that we're all looking for. I guess the follow-up clarifying question to that, while we're on the subject, off the topic of the RFP, but I think in relative to it, regarding, I'm curious to know what, if any, data, Sophia, quickly is being gathered, if any, from a survey perspective on, like, here are the options, we're gathering feedback. Is there currently any mechanism that's gathering feedback at the current moment? Because that'll determine my follow-up question.
So we're in the kind of the process of kind of this initial survey that we put out and whatnot. We just kind of closed it, so we have time to analyze comments. But that doesn't mean that we're not receiving feedback right now. It's just not through that mechanism. It kind of like continuing the conversation, broadening the conversation, updating the question as we move through the summer months.
Gotcha.
So do you have something specific in mind? That, I mean, we would.
Yeah. I think where I'm going with it is more, not so much the survey, but I think the survey is a mechanism to communicate and over communicate around the messaging. I don't know if you guys picked up on it. It was slightly mentioned, I think, in some of the comments, but really just a sentiment that there's a, politically, it's already been decided. There's a strong notion, I think, amongst the leaders in the community that it's being pushed down West Broadway. I won't say with the broader community. I'll say the leaders that I'm connected with. I think that's been the general sort of narrative. And so I'm wondering if there's an opportunity that it sounds like the information that we're asking for doesn't exist, maybe, and if it doesn't exist, we're working to get that information. I think as we're gathering and iterating the survey, because there'll be more ongoing conversations, we'll be gathering data from now to the time this project breaks ground. around community feedback. I just want to make sure that we're taking every opportunity through this process to communicate that what we're doing internally, like, so, hey, guys, we're working to put together RFP, and I don't know how how we can help amplify that communication, but I just want to make sure that we're counteracting this narrative out there that if it's true, I don't want to send false messaging. If it's not true, I don't want to put it out there. If it's true, then I think we owe from what I've heard today, that it will behoove us to maybe start to embed some of that in the process and start to make sure that it's very loud and clear, sort of what we're working on, what we're hearing, so that people are brought along to the journey and it's not sort of being told to them. Not to say that that was the case, but just throwing it out there because it was a trend in the conversation.
Right, it's a little bit of kind of getting this work started while we still haven't selected in a route and kind of the impact and perception of that.
Right.
Well, Sophia, I think that number 3 of Jimmy's comments are particularly poignant. And Jimmy, you're here, but he says, how can this group be a part of that work if a third-party consultant has been hired? And I think what I'm hearing is that this is a complicated process already. We're trying to engage with community, business, and civic to try to find the best alignment for our respective communities. Now we're putting a third party in there that's coming in to say, okay, well, we're gonna digest all this and add another layer of bureaucracy on top of it, and it can cloud the issue, complicate the matter, and actually slow the process down. And so I think that's what I'm hearing in Jimmy's comment, but it echoes my concern that maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit. To Chris's point, I am one of those community leaders that do not think that Broadway is the best route for this project, and so I'm trying to balance my discussion around this issue as we move through this process. But this displacement discussion seems to dilute from the real topic of where is this thing going to go and how is it going to be benefit the community in which it's going through. I understand that it's trying to get from the suburbs to downtown Minneapolis and beyond, but how is it going to benefit Broadway? I got several business interests on Broadway Avenue. I don't see this as being a positive. So when we're talking about displacing businesses on Broadway, and the project may not come down Broadway, what are we talking about? And so if you can address that issue or that question from Jimmy, that would help me understand what we're doing here.
Right, and go ahead. Please respond directly.
I was going to say, and just to follow up on Tim's comments, I think to merge what Jimmy is saying in the chat, and I think even Kenya mentioned this earlier around the under resources that are within the community entities. I think maybe there's opportunity within the RFP to specify that whoever this person is, because I think, some of these conversations, I would argue, live at the home of community. And when I say community, I mean within the neighborhood organizations who are proactively, having these conversations. One, because we have to go through them for consent to do these types of projects in the neighborhood, right? So I think there's some low-hanging fruit within the RFP to specify or even just give the resources directly to these entities to do that work. Or I would even argue, I'm not sure that it's a one organization on the north side who takes the lead on this, but I think as a whole, neighborhood organizations, that a lot of this proposal they could do through the informing of a lot of the BAC work. I'm just throwing out solutions to get to how do we all get to a feeling more comfortable about at least getting the information that we need to feel more comfortable about a decision, or helping the community get to a decision.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. I don't know if I heard a direct question there, but what I am taking away is the let's make sure we're incorporating that balance in terms of providing the information that community members are interested in hearing and want to hear about the routes that are proposed, having that data come back. And we do have that time as we take a look at this RFP timeline. That is going to be a lot of the work that we will be doing in pulling that information together in June, sharing that in July and August. So again, a lot of that information will be part of this process and at hand. So when we are able to bring someone to help lead some of the anti-displacement work, that information will be pulled together, will be vetted through both the business and the community advisory committee and our corridor management committee, and then allowed where we can sit with it for a while before it's actually pulled into the work of the working group. I just also want to, I see that there is one more question here from Kenya about will there be more funding to communities for community engagement? We understand that there's an additional need potentially for more resources. I don't know, Dana, do you want to talk a little bit about that in terms of maybe under the current contracts or as we go forward, what that might look like? Did we lose Dan maybe?
We might have.
We might have lost Dan.
I think so obviously to do any of this work, we need to get support for funding. And often a lot of that comes from our county partner and work for this anti-displacement efforts throughout the whole thing. I should probably need to come from a lot of places. So part of it is getting some of that together, and we obviously recognize the need, but putting together the plan is, I think, part of it. Both Kenya and Jimmy's hand are up, so I also just want to give the floor to them to just speak directly to add to the conversation. Kenya, I don't know if you want to jump in.
And to put my hand down the last time, so sorry about that. I really don't have anything different to say than what is noted there. Just that we, in our group conversation, noted that various community groups, including some of the ones that are currently connected to you, just don't have enough resources to do the engagement work. And again, we understand, under COVID, a lot of things have happened online. I'm conscious of the technology divide, folks not wanting to get online and not knowing, and that just isn't the best way. Of course, as you know, it's one mode, but we want to make sure folks have resources to get out there on the ground and knock on doors and, engage community traditionally, and more resources are needed for that. And then I think the other comment, just reiterating Chris's point around the clarification, it is needed. It is circulating in the community that Broadway has been determined. And while I'm a strong supporter of Broadway, I'm really a stronger supporter of, just making sure we're exploring both routes, in a transparent and open way, and making sure that that message gets out to the community that, it isn't predetermined. And, folks, feel skeptical anyway, right, about these things. And so let's just keep doing the best we can do to make sure the message is open and transparent and folks know it's still ongoing, so that's really, really important. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think it's a good note for the staff too, as we put more programs around supporting efforts, that the predetermined part of the conversation, if it makes it feel more predetermined, and being purposeful of our intentions and planning and messaging around all of that. I can move us on, but I don't want to cut off Jimmy if he had additional thoughts to add.
Yeah, I think two things I'd like to add. Thank you for taking the time to try to address my questions. I appreciate it. Tim has a valid point in which, I think you tried to address, but it feels as if there's just not a way to address it right now. I understand that the consultant is being brought in to inform our work as a committee, meaning that they're going to give us information to hopefully help us make decisions or provide input to make a decision down the line. But what it feels like is that there's just not a clear path on how that cycle will work and be efficient at the same time. So there's just not a way to understand as of yet. Obviously, they haven't been selected, how they can integrate with our work and be able to do theirs and inform us in a collaborative way, and not just like say, okay, here's all the information we found, and then bring it to us and give us, expect us to react. So how do we, keep in mind of a more collaborative working experience with that consultant as we move forward to keep us engaged and in the loop. Second thing is there a way to update the or create a kind of a model of timeline? I know you guys did that with the original meeting, and we talked a lot about kind of what you were doing, but is there a more visually conceptual way we can put this together? I think part of our disconnect as a group, especially, is understanding like kind of where we are within the process and understanding where we're plugging in along the way. So if we can make a graphic that shows, okay, like we're here, right today, this is where we'll be, what have you, or some sort of swim lanes, however we can, put that out there. I think that'll be very helpful to follow along. And then that way we could come back to that as a reference point every time there's some new information to be dealt with. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And I just want to echo the kind of that collaborative conversation piece is that, the development of ideas and policies and direction versus the reacting. I think we've heard that a lot from the committee. So how these discussions happen are just really want to key in on that. And that we've heard that, especially in the virtual environment. I think even in this committee so far, it feels very presenty. And to the more that we can get to more of these collaborative conversations, I think that's an overall need that I think has been identified by multiple folks, and especially in the anti-displacement work. If in the since we're getting kind of short on time, if it's okay with everybody, I can move on to a little bit of the summary of what the engagement feedback that we've heard in our March through May, and then give Nick a little bit of time to start talking about stations and how we end up placing them in the areas that don't have them. And that would be for either, so for area 3, that would be either route as well. And just kind of also couch that we have a lot more detail to get in with the committee. So I'll jump in and obviously to kind of wrap up the last conversation too, is that there's, you might not have dive head first into the RFP over the holiday weekend, so you do have a little bit of time to read it and get any specific comments back to Sam to be incorporated. So just want to just reiterate, there's more time for that discussion. So just to highlight that we've had some very busy months, and also really recognizing that there's a lot more engagement that needs to happen continuously within the community, and both this committee inviting us to events and attending things that you've all encouraged us to do or organize with us has been really helpful, as well as all the work of the cohort. The community cohort has really extended the message and the feedback, and just realizing that's important. So we've been out and about a bunch in May, and just some of the highlights of that month. Obviously there was more, but just taking a few. And just want to kind of let folks know where we are. So, we are constantly receiving feedback, and we will never not be, right? It is an ongoing process. But we do need time to take in what we've heard and actually look at it to make sure that we're incorporating what the community is saying to us into the project itself, and kind of advancing the conversation, right? So reflecting what we're hearing and updating information and kind of having that process. So we'll have a full report in July. of kind of the last few months, but we've already started to look at it. So we didn't wait until May 28th to take a look at the comments. It's something that the staff has done continuously, whether that's these in-person meetings or the survey or general comments and whatnot. And we're giving today's kind of a preview of what we've heard and all that kind of stuff. I also want to fully acknowledge that we've had, so in terms of our survey, some of that was done by paper and some of that's still being tabulated. So not all of that is fully reflected in what we're saying today. And just to Kenya's point about the funding for community organizations to really do a whole bunch of, to do community engagement. I mean, what the responses that we received, the events that have been held have been enriched so much by the cohort and what they're doing. So just also want to reflect that in our talk. So through the last couple months, there's been over 60 community events, and that doesn't include the communications and other things that, but this is kind of like the actual or conversations that folks have kind of naturally is more the event, right? Reaching a few thousand people. We had over 1,600 people respond to the survey. The paper surveys are still being tabulated. About 500 comments on the interactive map, and about 23 emails where people were just submitting general questions, right? Like, I don't like, and it doesn't quite fit with the survey or whatever, so they just submitted questions that were more or comments most appropriate for what they wanted to talk about. We also get a lot of just general questions and phone calls from folks just kind of working through things through the months. So just to kind of remind folks a little bit about how we frame some of our questions, because people are obviously responding to what we're putting out in the world. We asked about site-specific issues and opportunities. We asked really, are these routes what they should be? Did we miss anything? Is there support for what we put forth? Obviously, there's a lot of questions, right? That was a big theme, is that people needed more information, but that was one of the main things that we were asking. Asked about the project goals and some of the preliminary designs, preferences, and station locations. On our interactive map, just a little bit of where people commented. So when you were in our interactive map, you could either kind of comment on the overall map or dive into specific areas, and got a mix of concerns, opportunities, and desired station locations, and we'll reflect that a little bit more later. We got the most comments kind of generally in area 3, as folks probably noted, that's where we've had the biggest change, right? So kind of jumping into that, and also still that mix of area opportunities and concerns and questions as well. So there's a lot of comments, and we still need to go through them, but just to give a little bit of example, we heard a lot about business support during construction and kind of the direct impact. We have kind of to the about economic opportunities, wealth building, and leveraging investment, kind of that last piece of things that people are already doing. How can this project further and support that? And especially we heard a lot about supporting development that's kind of already getting started in the community. And then we heard a lot about where people want to go and the assets within community that folks value. And one of the major questions that also came through is both kind of parking, how you deal with parking, how you deal with pedestrian access, and that was kind of through the corridor. Going a little bit to the Robbinsdale kind of County Road 81 Crystal area, just to the access, right, getting to the stations on 81, and then how bikes and pedestrians have moved safely across the highway were some of the big themes, as well as, and this was heard in other areas too, but incorporating kind of your green space. What is then your landscaping? How do you kind of incorporate that? And then also wondering about traffic operations. You have a busier road. How does that all work? We asked, kind of in terms of route validation and, kind of the two things that we proposed. We heard both support and concern, right? And some of the support is also, we need more information before we can make a decision. So fully want to recognize that. Specifically to some of the survey and official comments, we've received we have heard both support and concern, whether it's West Broadway or Lowry. And while a survey is not statistically significant, we have to kind of actually evaluate all of the pieces and bring that forward. This just shows a little bit about where folks are, expressing their support. So we heard over 1,000 people kind of say that they'd like to see West Broadway advance, and around 500 say Lowry. And again, this is not statistically significant necessarily. It's just to give us a flavor of where folks are, asking about. This is a little bit of how that breaks down in the survey. We also, gave people the opportunity to say that they needed more information or they have another preference. Some to why folks were citing their preferences. So providing access just to north or to specific locations in the north side. And a common theme was reaching density and maximizing ridership, or supporting communities that are underserved by transit. One of the most common questions also was just reaching an either employment or business district, or some kind of job employment centers, or kind of those destinations associated with that. One of the kind of pieces that we're not fully addressing today, and I know Ian, I'll probably give the floor to Ian for a sec because one of them came from him and partners, was we asked if anything was missing. And the two kind of main suggestions that we heard was a suggestion of like a transit mall on 21st north of West Broadway. And then also kind of that if you're going up to Lowry, so not necessarily if you're going to West Broadway, but if you're reaching Lowry, is there a way that's on the west side of the river versus the east side? So instead of taking Washington, finding another way. We kind of responded previously before to Lyndale, but kind of other suggestions, and that was a theme that continued to come through. And on the north part of the corridor, kind of we had questions of like 169, which would really be a different project route. So it was a little bit different ballpark. Ian, not to put you on the spot, but anything you want to add about this suggestion?
Well, we talked about it with the group the other day, and so I just am saying that this is not really a suggestion that is advocated by our group or by the representatives in North Minneapolis, but I will say that there are a number of folks who are very concerned about basically between between Lyndale Avenue and Girard Avenues on Broadway, just because of the amount of space and turning lanes and everything else. And so, I think that the group should be prepared, because I know the folks that are circulating this letter, like Bishop Howell and others, that you will receive something, I think, in the future about their concerns. I mean, their concerns really were basically congestion on that particular route if it goes down West Broadway, and also business closures, et cetera, during construction. So since I'm not going to be officially, I'm not officially pushing this agenda, I will just, I'll, once I receive a letter, I'll send it to you so you can review it. But that's their big concerns. I was just surprised the amount of people that kind of organically came together to do this. So I took all the information they gave and put it into a format, and then they kind of ran with it. So that's what they're doing, and you'll probably receive it in the next few days or weeks.
Sounds good. And we'll also kind of put some work towards this as well, to acknowledge that this is what we heard. So we're running out of time, so I'm kind of trying to talk fast, and I don't mean to kind of breeze over things, but we can definitely kind of come and revisit this. But just want to acknowledge that we also got a lot of information about our project goals. The project goals, turn into evaluation criteria, so we definitely want to spend some time focused on the committee on that. Kind of the three things that came out is that connection to regional destinations and jobs, and advancing equity, and just kind of overall improving your transit service were things that folks told us to really focus on. And there were some suggestions of comments, and also at the end of the presentation, just kind of put a sampling of some of the things that people said. So we'll feel free to kind of peruse a little bit. But kind of to some of the earlier things is in our work, we did hear quite a bit about taking an equitable approach, and actually kind of leaning into this anti-displacement conversation, whether it's direct or indirect, and just kind of keep going on that. And with that, that was like the super fast version of the engagement received. And so sorry we'll turn it over to Nick really quick. I know people probably have 9:30 meetings and things. And we'll come back next month with more.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is going to be the 30-second elevator presentation. So we're going to go through this real quick, but it's just to start the conversation as we're taking a look at our route options and having that discussion and coming forward with the recommendation. We need to start taking a look at where station locations are going, and this map is kind of to recenter and ground us that on the north portion and that area 1, those stations and the alignment are already there in design, and we have a good placement on those. But it's as we start going south into area 2 and area 3 is where the conversations are. So just briefly, with the reroute, or with our exploration here of route options, there's 7 stations that are going to be affected by a route change, and those are the previous stations: Van White, Penn, Theodore Worth Park, Plymouth Avenue Station, Golden Valley, 42nd, Bass Lake Road, and 63rd. So next slide, please. So as we're going forward, it's fairly obvious, and we've talked before about recommending continuing a station at 63rd and Bass Lake Road, because that alignment, if we're going down County Road 81, is really directly adjacent to where we had stations there when we were in the rail corridor. When we get down into Robbinsdale, we're recommending taking a look at a downtown station, and what we've also talked about our new destination that would be in alignment if we're going down County Road 81 through that area is North Memorial Hospital. So when we get into Minneapolis with our route options, that we have a lot more discussion to go based on input from stakeholders and logic areas to look at. So this graphic here that we're showing is just really this is preliminary details based on input from the interactive map and some of the community input that we've had out there. So it's a little bit of a map showing where the interest was for station locations. The larger circle is where we've had more comments for a station in that area, and the smaller is maybe a little less desire or indication of a station in those locations. So so this just gives an idea of kind of where we're getting information from the public. Next slide, please. And this is kind of the next steps here, as we're going to continue to get stakeholder and community input. We're going to look at key destinations along the route options out there to help us with a determination or a recommendation going forward. Look for transit connections, where those would be most robust and make sense. Obviously, looking at population density, we want to have a station where it's going to serve folks, and then also in consideration is as we start siting that station, what's the available right of way in that area, what are existing and future development opportunities in that area. And I think, just to bring it up again, typically on light rail, the preferred station in a downtown area is a half-mile to a mile station, but that's going to be based on demand and where logical station locations would be. Next slide. So as we look at stationary and planning, there's always the platform that's right on the alignment, but then we look at the site going around that station platform. But then when station area planning happens, maybe outside just the engineering construction, but community works will take a look at that half-mile area around a station, that radius around a station, and what the impacts are and who we're serving. And We'll go through these real quick, but these are just station elements that are included with stations, and as we look at it, and let's go to the next map. This map is how we'll come to the community after we've looked at where the station locations would be. We'll start determining, okay, how do we get folks to those stations safely? How do we make the transit connections in there? Are there opportunities to have the pickup and drop, passenger pickup and drop off sites nearby, and you know, if there's parking available or necessary for that station location? Those are some of the considerations. So that's it.
Okay, we're past time, so obviously we'll come back and talk much more about this in the future meetings. I think our July meeting will be very focused on engineering and that development. And just a reminder that we're pushed back a week to accommodate the holidays at the next meeting. And to get ready for the July meeting, we'll be reaching out to have some conversations with you about site-specific areas, kind of that collaborative process, because would be helpful. So sorry to rush. Any last parting comments from our chairs?
No, we didn't get through everything. We are at time, and we'll have to do a better job of staying on task next time. Like somebody said, we don't want to rush through this, so thanks, everybody.
So I have one closing comment, Sophia. This is Tim. Several meetings ago, I had a question about the voting that we talked about at the CMC level, about each community and each stakeholder having a vote in what happens here ultimately. And I don't know that this group was able to hear that discussion or talk about that discussion, but at some point in the near future, I think we should discuss it. I think in terms of parity, for Minneapolis to have one vote and Crystal to have one vote is disproportionate. And I think that the folks from Minneapolis would want to hear about that. And so maybe we should, if we can put that on the agenda at some point, I'd appreciate it.
We kind of lost that one last time. I think Sam's kind of involved in that conversation right now too with our chair. And so some direct conversation. I know Sam's been wanting to reach out, so might just add you to the list of folks that Sam's kind of career, not to tell us how to do stuff, but maybe a conversation directly would be good as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.